Quick disclaimer. This channel does not promote, encourage, endorse, or glorify the use of legal or illegal psychoactive substances. This is simply a harm reduction education video disguised as entertainment. What's up, guys? It's Psychedelical coming at you with another video. And today I've decided, as you can probably tell from the title, I'm going to tell you guys about the first time I took mushroom tea. Alright. So, let's get into this. So, the days leading up to this event where I took mushroom tea for the first time, I had been planning on doing mushrooms again with this group of friends, and I actually forgot to say this in the last video, but none of the names that I use in these videos are actually the real names of these people. They're simply fictional nicknames that I've made up in place of their names for their protection and anonymity. But other than that, this took place with my friends Avery, Nolan, Daniel, and Casey. So Casey was actually new to the friend group. Avery had met him at the place where he worked. I'm not going to get too specific, but they worked in a kitchen together, so Casey was hanging out with us for a little bit. We hadn't actually met him, but we were playing games with him a bunch. And Nolan and Daniel, I've been friends with them, Avery, Nolan, and Daniel, since forever. We're actually not friends anymore, which is unfortunate, but regardless, the story still has a lot of meaning in my place of heart. So Avery, Nolan, Daniel, and Casey, we all planned to meet up and take these shrooms. It was my responsibility to get them, and we were talking about eating them or doing tea. For whatever reason, we decided to trip with Casey when we had never met him in real life before, which was a little weird. But I got these shrooms. I forget how much I actually bought, but it was plenty for all of us. And I was planning on taking 3.5 grams, which I actually ended up taking a little bit more, but we'll get to that. So, day of, we get together at Avery's dad's house. His parents were split up, and we get together at his dad's house. He stays down in the basement, so we're all hanging out in the basement. We're like, alright, well, before we trip, we want to go eat something. So we go to this burger place. I'm not going to say the name because it would kind of dox us. We go to this burger place. We eat some food, which is, first off, if you're planning on taking mushrooms, which I'm not saying you should, you absolutely should not. But if you do, burgers and fries and greasy food is not good to eat beforehand. We'll get to that later. So, we eat our food and we go back to Avery's place. And now, we're hanging out in his basement and we decide, alright, it's time to take these shrooms. We got all of any snacks or drinks we're gonna want. We got everything ready. We ate dinner. It's time to take these shrooms. I think it was about 7 o'clock by this point. So, we had decided on doing shroom tea. So, we all go weigh out our shrooms, and this is where Nolan actually decided that I think he was planning on taking 3 grams, but he decided he wanted to do 2.6 instead, and he gave me the 0.4, and I just decided, fuck it, I'm gonna put that in mine as well. So I actually ended up doing a little bit more than an eighth, which I think I was the only one there who had an actually good trip, but we'll get to that. So get all of our shrooms weighed out, we crush them up, we put them into the cups. We did not have enough experience to know that we should have used tea bags or something, but we just put a bunch of ground mushrooms into the cup, and we poured boiling water over it. And we waited about 15 to 20 minutes, because that's how long we heard you had to do it for. And then we all just started drinking them. And we drank them pretty fast. I ate some of the chunks in my cup because they were floating around and it was pretty nasty. We also put way, way, way too much honey and stuff in it, trying to mask the mushroom flavor. So it ended up being pretty disgusting. But after I drank most of my tea, I decided I had to go take a piss. So I went to the bathroom, and it had only been like 5 minutes since I drank my tea. And I felt them coming on as I was washing my hands. Like, they were coming on hard, too. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I already had some visuals. And when I went back down to the basement, I asked them, I was like, is anybody else feeling the shroom tea? And they all said, yeah, dude, we're all feeling it. It's like really fast. And so I decided that, alright, well, it's happening, so we're just going to embrace it. And I sat down on the futon with Nolan and Casey, and we were all at one point leaning back, staring up at the ceiling, tripping out way too hard. Like 15 minutes after drinking this tea, we were all shocked at how fast it came on. And at this point, we decided to smoke. And so we rolled up a blunt, and we were all passing it around. And at some point, I can't really remember what happened. I think a cart was going around as well. But I hit this cart, and I just blacked out for a few minutes. They told me that I just kind of stared off into space with a blank look on my face for a while. And then all I remember is I came back to it and I just had to puke bad. Like, it was coming up. And I made it to the trash can. I threw up. And I was like, damn, that was terrible. But it felt it didn't feel good to throw up, but after the fact and after it was done, it felt so relieving that it was over and better. And I could just kind of try and enjoy my trip. But I still was like, alright, well, I gotta pick up my mess. This is my mess. And so I didn't want to go out to the dumpster by myself. So I asked Daniel to accompany me, and he obliged because there was two people who didn't take as much. Daniel and Avery did not take as much. Avery was still pretty out of it just because he was always a little bit of a lightweight, but Daniel was still with it for the most part. Anyways, I go out to the dumpster and throw out my mess, and then we go back downstairs to the basement, and that's when Nolan says he thinks he's gonna throw up. And so Daniel goes to get one of the trash bags from upstairs to put in the garbage can because I had just made a mess there. And right as he comes downstairs, it was scenic timing. Nolan just spews over the edge of the futon all over the floor. It was disgusting. It just kept going. Right as this is happening, Avery's dad comes downstairs. The owner of this house comes downstairs, and he sees this just scene of me laying on the floor, fucking Casey and Nolan laying on either side of the futon. Nolan just threw up all over the place. Daniel's got a trash bag and trash can in his hand, and Avery's just laying out on this other little couch he had in his basement. It was a mess, and his dad just starts laughing, and he just goes, "Oh, we used to do so many drugs when we were young." And I look up, because I noticed he was there, and he's just petting Avery's head. It was crazy to me at the time. I was like, what the fuck is happening? Because mushrooms will make you just lose sense of reality in a way that, or that's psychedelics in general, but just in a way that you don't think would be possible before you've tried them. And so he eventually goes back upstairs, and Avery and Daniel were actually kind of ended up being the goats this night, because by this point I was coming up on my peak. I was tripping way too hard to help with anything. Casey was tripping way too hard to help with anything. Nolan, he was just having the worst trip of his life. I still don't know if he's ever tripped again to this day on anything, and he only ever did mushrooms, but still. So it was just a mess, but Avery and Daniel ended up picking up Nolan's mess for him and got everything back in order. And I remember this whole time there was this movie blaring in the background. I think it was Kung Fu Panda that they were watching, but they had it so loud as I was just trying to enjoy my trip on the floor. And I asked them to turn it down so many times, and eventually they turned it off because they were done with it. And then I remember, and here's where we'll get into the actual trip and the visuals, not what just happened. So, the trip itself, I personally had a great time. I don't remember everything perfectly. There's a couple gaps of time that, like, I'm just not going to talk about because I don't really remember them, but I remember what was going on in my head. So for a while I was in this black space, and I had all these bright white math equations and bits of information just rushing past my head, and it just looked so cool. It was almost like the Star Wars intro where everything's just rushing past your head, or like the hyperdrive. It looked like that. It was awesome. But that's all I really remember for visuals. As for the trip, I remember thinking I was dead at one point, and then hearing somebody else talking, and I was like, oh, well, I can't be dead. They're still alive. I don't know. That made sense to me at the time. The visuals in the room were ridiculous. I mean, people's faces were just morphing in front of me. The lights were drooping off the ceiling. It looked stupid. Like, I mean, I guess that's what over an eighth of penis envy mushrooms does to you. And we were at this point in the trip when the movie had stopped, or at least been turned down, and I was able to talk again. I remember oh my god, we were just so high at this point. Like, I remember looking up at Casey and Daniel and just asking them, like, how are y'all feeling? And they were like, I just faced humanity, but I'm feeling a little better. And Daniel was a little bit better than Casey was, but anyways, yeah, faced humanity was a good way to put that. That was a very intense trip. But so Casey and I were just chit-chatting, shooting the shit back and forth, and I remember eventually it came down to, I said, everything feels like everything right now. And then directly after that, I said, wow, I sound like someone on drugs. And Casey said, well, that's probably because you are, buddy. That's probably because you are. And they tried fucking with me, asking me, oh, do you even know where you are, what's going on? And then I think I said something like, oh, I'm in somebody's basement tripping my ass off way too hard right now. And the rest of that trip was pretty much just coming down. We were all super high. I think we probably ate a little snacks after that, drank some water, smoked some weed, and then we all went to bed. And I mean, the come down wasn't super eventful. Nolan never actually got out of the futon. He was there the whole trip under the blankets. It was bad for him. Like, bad. It was terrible. I felt really bad for him, but I was in no place to help at that point. And yeah, the rest of the come down went pretty smooth, other than Nolan having a terrible trip. And after that, the next day, we all went home, and this is where it gets a little bit more serious, because this is where I'm going to talk about not necessarily the dangers, but just some of the life-changing effects of these psychedelic substances. Because the next day, I went home and I quit the current job I had, which was I think I worked at like that's kind of gonna give too much away, but I worked at a sledding hill of sorts, I guess. And I quit my job there, and I started working in a kitchen with Daniel, who didn't work with Casey, but Avery actually started working in that kitchen with us as well. So I started working in that kitchen, but I made this decision just totally based on a whim, and it actually just ended up being a bad one. That job actually kind of treated me poorly, and I ended up quitting there as well, because we were always short-staffed, and I was always being expected to do a bunch of work that another employee was supposed to do while we were short-staffed, and we were all doing extra work anyways, and I was making less than her, so I ended up leaving. And but the point is I would not have made the decision to leave my job at the sledding hill in the first place if I hadn't had that trip. And luckily it didn't turn out to be that impactful of a decision, because I was still pretty young, and it wasn't horrible, but it's still kind of like, I was in a depression back then, and it didn't make it any better per se, even though I had a great trip. Like, psychedelics change the way you think about the world, and it's not always in the best of ways. It can be for your benefit if you know how to use them, and you use them appropriately and properly, but even so, it could still turn on you. So that's why you should always take caution when taking psychedelic substances, and honestly, the best way to avoid any of those risks is to just not fucking take them. Don't take the drugs if you don't want the damage. So, anyways, that is the story of my first time taking mushroom tea. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.